Hi, I'm Sarah Swanson, and I'm an IPS trainer at the IPS Employment Center. Our center um, provides training and consultation for programs, states, and countries that want to implement and sustain IPS. And we coordinate a large international learning community of 24 states in the US and 6 other countries who all want to learn from each other as they implement IPS. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about what is individual placement and support, or IPS, and I'm going to focus on the role of case managers and housing specialists so that you can understand what your role in employment will be. Oops, it isn't moving forward.
Okay. Are the arrows on the bottom working if you press those?
Oh, thank you. Before we get going, I just want to give a little overview of the training. We're going to talk about the fact that IPS is an evidence-based practice, and it's based on 8 practice principles, actually. Employment and education are important for young adults, and people are their own best judges of when they're ready to pursue careers. But some people may need encouragement to feel hopeful about careers, or they may need help exploring interests, because finding a job that is exciting to a young person is what is most likely to propel that person into working on a career. Case managers, mental health workers, and housing staff all have a role to play in supporting young adults as they pursue careers, even though an IPS specialist is the person who will directly help the person search for work, support them while they're working, help people explore different careers, help people look into different school and training programs, and support people while they're in school and training. We still need the whole team of people supporting the young person as they pursue their interests. And finally, integrated services leads to better outcomes. So now I'll move ahead and we'll start talking about each topic one by one. The first is that IPS is an evidence-based practice. Multiple randomized controlled trials, sometimes referred to as RCTs, demonstrate that individuals who have access to IPS are 2 to 3 times more likely to become employed. So a randomized controlled trial is the gold standard in research. And that means that when people agree to be part of the research study, they're randomly assigned to either IPS, an IPS program, which is the condition that's being studied, or a control program, which is whatever employment program is available in the area that they would be eligible for. And we also want to point out that to be an evidence-based practice, there should be multiple randomized controlled trials done by different researchers, and that helps eliminate bias, so that you don't need to worry so much that one researcher who's done all the research trials has a bias that IPS will work. Instead, as you'll see soon, IPS has been researched by multiple different researchers in different locations. And that's important too, that you can feel confident that IPS works in urban and rural environments, and as we know now, works in the US and European countries, and in Australia and other places. The other thing that makes an evidence-based practice an evidence-based practice is that it has a fidelity scale, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And a fidelity scale outlines what are the most important components of an evidence-based practice. And lastly, an evidence-based practice should have a manual or some sort of guide that would help programs implement the practice and understand how to operationalize the practice. So IPS has all of those conditions, and that's why it's an evidence-based practice. It has 8 practice principles. The first is zero exclusion criteria, and that means that anybody who wants to work is eligible for IPS. That's regardless of whether or not the person has an active substance use disorder, or whether the person is homeless, whether the person has untreated mental health problems, or whether the person has a legal history. Nothing would prevent the person from entering an IPS program. It's all based on client choice. And the reason for that is that we've observed that the people who are most likely to work are the people who want to work. Research actually has demonstrated that. The second criteria is that consumer preferences are important. So people are more likely to stay engaged in an IPS program all the way to employment if they are working with a specialist who listens to what's important to them. And that could mean the type of job they want. It could mean the location of the job. It could be related to where they meet with the IPS specialist and how often they meet with a specialist. So we really need to ask questions about how do you feel this is going? Am I providing the kind of support you want? How do you feel about your goal? Are you still interested in what we're doing together? Um, and when specialists and the entire treatment team does that, people are more likely to stay engaged and keep working on a career. The third principle is that mental health, or in your case, housing services, are integrated with IPS services. And that means that an IPS specialist would come to a weekly meeting with the housing team. Um, and they may not discuss all of the people on their caseload. They might discuss a few who are at a critical juncture. For instance, somebody who just got a job, they might bring that person up to talk about what the job is, to celebrate that success with the team, and then also to ask what supports the team thinks this person may need. And everybody brainstorms together about how they can support the person in the new job. Or if somebody's having problems with a job, the IPS specialist might talk about that. Um, the other the other advantage to using an integrated approach is that the IPS specialist will hear about other parts of the person's life they may not have known about otherwise. So if the person has a relapse in their substance use, that's important for the IPS specialist to know. Or if the person is in mental health treatment and is starting a new medication, that can be important for the job also, especially if the medication may make the person drowsy or have another side effect that could impact the person's work performance. Um, those things are important for a specialist to know. So it's just helpful for everybody to be communicating and working together weekly. The IPS specialist will stay for the entire mental health treatment team meeting because he or she wants to hear about people who may be good candidates for work but haven't been referred to IPS services yet. And by doing that, she'll get to know people on the housing caseload over time. So when they are referred to her, she may know a little bit about their background already, and that can be really helpful. So the idea is that the IPS specialist is a full member of the team and stays to listen to people who are not part of the IPS program, but also ask for help thinking about a few people who are in the IPS program. The fourth principle is that competitive employment or mainstream education is the goal. So these are regular jobs that anyone can apply for, regardless of disability status or regardless of being youth and at-risk youth. If they're programs that are open to the general public, if they're jobs that are available to the general public or to young people who who aren't at risk or don't have homelessness or mental health problems, but just to help youth in general get started in their working lives, those jobs are fine. The reason that we focus on regular schooling and regular employment is because that's what most people said that they want, that they, part of going to work for a lot of people is feeling like they're part of the larger community and that they're not set aside in some program. And with youth especially, we are trying to provide support as they transition into living regular lives in the community. So we want to start with competitive jobs and mainstream education. One exception to that is alternate high schools. Um, if we think it's so important for young people to get at least a high school degree, that if the only way someone can get through high school is by attending an alternative high school, um, that's okay. We just really need to help people get at least a high school degree, but hopefully more. If people are going to be able to earn a living wage at some point and support themselves, we need to help them get a little bit of training or education on top of that high school degree. The fifth principle is that benefits planning is offered. So if somebody does receive, um, food stamps or SSI, we want to give them information about how their benefits will be affected by working before they start earning a paycheck and help them manage that as their hours and wages increase. We also, the IPS specialists can offer to help report earnings to different sources of entitlements so that people don't end up in an overpayment situation. The sixth principle is that the job search occurs soon after the person enters services. So we don't ask people to go through pre-vocational programming, work readiness groups, um, assessments, or work tryouts. When someone says they want to work, the IPS specialists will meet with them. They might spend a couple or maybe 3 appointments talking about the person's interests and goals and working on a resume. And then they're going to be out there meeting face to face with employers. Um, so it could be the employment specialist who meets with employers to learn about their business and what they look for when they're hiring. Or it could be the job seeker who doesn't wish to disclose that he's part of Covenant House Services, who is out there talking to employers. Or it could be both of them together. But it's really important that the job search starts on average in about 30 days. Um, for some people who want to investigate different kinds of careers, instead of applying for jobs right away, what they might do is go visit different employers to have informational interviews. And those are when you would call an employer, or the IPS specialist would call an employer and say, I'm working with a young person who thinks he may be interested in going into a culinary arts program, but we thought it'd be helpful to talk to people working in the field before he invests his time and money to make sure that's what he wants to do. Could we schedule 20 minutes to come in and talk to you about being a chef at your restaurant? And prior to the appointment, they would come up with a list of questions to ask, like, what is a typical day like? What's most challenging about this job? What do you enjoy most about this job? How did you get this job? Did you, what kind of education or training did you have? And then was it necessary to start in a more entry-level position or not? What does the future look like for people in this field? So they'll come up with a list of questions like those, and they might visit several employers. If someone's interested in culinary arts, they might talk to cooks and chefs in different kinds of restaurants, or a person might be trying to decide between being a chef and working in the social service system. So they might also look at different kinds of jobs in the social service system. Those contacts would count as a first employer contact. Just for some people, it's going to be about getting a job, and for some people, it's going to be about learning about jobs. But in person is what's really key, because that's how people get a sense of what the workplace is like, and is it hot or cold? Is it frantic with people running around? Is it noisy? Is it quiet? And now those factors are really important for some people. So it gives them a better picture of what it would be like to work there, rather than just reading job descriptions on the internet. Um, before we move on, I just want to say that the principle about consumer preferences and the principle about the job search occurring right after the person enters services are really attractive to clients. And some mental health and housing practitioners discuss some of the IPS principles with the person before they make the referral. And I've heard that what attracts a lot of people is knowing that their preferences will be honored, to the degree that the job market will honor those. And also that the job search starts right away. There's no pre-vocational programming. Number 7 is that the IPS specialist builds relationships with employers who have the types of jobs that may interest consumers. So if a consumer is interested in social service type positions, an IPS specialist might visit homeless shelters, food banks, if the person doesn't have training yet, food banks, or different places where the person can have a job helping others, maybe working in dietary in a nursing home, because there is a lot of interaction with older people doing that. So they would visit those kinds of employers and have an appointment to talk about what the employer needs when she's hiring, what type of personal characteristics are a good fit for her workplace, what types of skills and experiences are required, if any. And then might return to talk about a job seeker who would be a good fit for the business. And that can help a lot of people find just the right job fit. But if a person doesn't want to disclose that they're working with Covenant House, they don't need to do that. And the IPS specialist can help from behind the scenes. Finally, job and education supports are individualized and continuous. So when a person gets a job, half the battle has been won. The other half of the battle is to help the person settle into the job and succeed. And that's also true with education. So different people need different kinds of supports. For a job, one person might need wake-up calls, another person might need help dealing with anxiety about work, and another person might need to learn some basic workplace rules, like, if you're going to be late for work, you need to call and ask to speak to your manager to explain why you're going to be late and when you're going to get there. And you can't be late more than, if you're late 3 times, you may get fired. So some people just need help with that basic understanding of how the workplace operates. And people who are in school might need help setting aside time to study. They may need to understand what good study skills are. They may need help finding out how to get tutoring. So it all depends on what each person needs. And those are the 8 practice principles for IPS. So let's move on. Employment and education are important for young adults. It's age appropriate. It's what people do in their late teens and early 20s, is start to think about how they're going to support themselves and what they might enjoy. And if possible, it helps a great deal to avoid a gap in education and employment. People who have a gap, sometimes those gaps can end up extending longer than they had intended, and it gets harder and harder to get back on track again. So ideally, we want to start helping juniors in high school think about what they're going to do when they graduate. Are they going to go to school? And if they have any interest in school or a training program, taking them to go visit those places so the goal becomes really concrete, not just sort of a vague idea. Leading them through the FAFSA application, and all the steps they need for financial aid if they're going to go that route. So that when they graduate, they can avoid the temptation to goof off for a while and instead go right into the next step, which might be a job or training or education. It provides structure, which a lot of young people benefit from, and most adults also benefit from some structure. Almost everybody who goes to work or school reports that they feel better about themselves when they do that. It provides opportunities for people to learn about their interests. A lot of young people may try some different kinds of jobs to learn what job they like. And that's okay. We need to help them go through a few different jobs or sometimes even more to land on what they really enjoy. The goal is that eventually people will have some financial independence, and people who don't work are much more likely to develop mental health problems and substance use problems. So we want to help people avoid that trap. Also, keep in mind that if somebody wants to apply for disability benefits or SSI benefits, that even if they think they're just going to use those benefits for a short period of time, that's actually a fallacy. Less than 1% of people who go on the Social Security system ever exit the rolls except by death. So even when people think they're just going to use Social Security on a short term basis, they generally stay on it for life. And that means that they're signing up for a life of poverty and, not really being part of the working world. So you might just share that information with people who want to sign up for benefits. And of course, it's their choice, but give them the information. Um, so who is eligible for IPS? We covered this a little bit already, but it's anybody who wants to work because people are their own best judges of when they're ready. This model was originally developed for people with serious mental illnesses like schizophrenia, and many of those people have gone to work while they were still actively psychotic, hallucinating. I've been amazed over the years at the people who have been able to work because they felt like it was an important part of their life. Back when I worked with clients, I remember working with one guy who, you know, had pretty disorganized thoughts. He couldn't really get a straight sentence out. And he also couldn't keep track of his work schedule at all. And so he just got up every morning and walked a mile to work, and they let him know whether or not he was on the schedule that day. And I just thought, what a commitment. This guy really wants to work. So, in spite of all the problems he had, he was successful. Young adults may change their goals frequently. One week they might want a job, the next week they might want to go to school, they might change their mind about the type of career they want often. And I think, we need to feel good about that if possible and not write them off when they change their minds frequently because it means that they're excited about the different possibilities. And we need to try to stay right where they're at and be excited with them and just say, that's great. Let's start looking into what it takes to be a fireman or firewoman. And let's go talk to some people and find out what the academy is all about. And maybe next week they'll have changed their mind again, but we won't keep them engaged in IPS if we aren't enthusiastic and we aren't right where they are. I also wanted to talk about the dignity of risk taking and the duty to provide informed choice. So basically, that just means that we want to support people even when we think there's a risk that they won't succeed at their goal. And if you think about your life, try to imagine what was a risk that you took. For instance, maybe you moved across the country, or maybe you got married or had a child. All of those things involve some risk. But if people in your life had been telling you, you can't do that, I think it's too much, how discouraging that would have been. And even if the risk you took didn't work out, how important it was for you to be able to take that risk and find out for yourself. So we want to, support people. We can help them sort of evaluate what are the possible risks, what are the possible benefits of doing that. Um, how could you lessen the possible risk? But ultimately, be respectful of the person making their own decision. And help every young person consider goals for careers. Every young person should have discussions about employment. Some people are going to need help choosing a career or pursuing employment. It may be that they're having a good time goofing off with their friends, which I think I might have fallen into as a young person if I could have gotten away with it. So I don't mean to disparage that, but other people don't really feel hopeful that they'll find a job they like. Maybe they have seen other people sort of, um, working away at jobs they don't like, and it doesn't occur to them that a job can be satisfying, even if every day isn't a total joy. I think that our jobs are really satisfying. And so we can talk about that. There are jobs that make you feel good about yourself and feel satisfied that you did some good in the world that day, or that you did a good job, you were successful, and they provide a lot of social interaction. Help them consider why people work. Um, Talk to every young person about their interests that might be related to a job. Ask them, what do you want to be doing in 5 years? What do you want your life, where do you want to be living? What do you want to be doing during the day? What relationships do you want to have in your life? Help them envision where they want to be in 5 years. And then a lot of people will say they want to be working and they want a good paying job, or they want a job in a certain field. Um, so help them envision a future. Don't push. Just have short conversations about work, um, where you're helping them consider working or not working rather than pushing them. Just say, I believe you have strengths. An employer would be lucky to have you, but only you know when it's the right time. And talk to them about different types of jobs you think they might enjoy. See if you manage to spark a little interest by doing that. So you have a handout that goes along with this training. And on the front, it outlines the principles of IPS. And on the back, it lists different types of questions that you could ask to start a little conversation about employment. And when people are ambivalent, you might just once a week, or maybe every other week, if the person starts to seem like they're digging their heels in, back off a little bit, but talk about work in another way. Start with a different question and just help people to consider what life is like with work versus without work, or a career goal. Um, the next thing I wanted to tell you is that caseworkers, mental health workers, housing staff all have a role to play in supporting young adults with their careers. So the first is what I just discussed, discussing work and careers, having short, strengths-based, hopeful conversations. One idea is to offer an IPS specialist to come to an appointment and just talk to the person about their interests and share where he or she has been helping people find employment. So the person can think, oh, my peers are doing um, landscaping, or my peers are in school, or um, somebody just got a job um, cleaning surgical equipment in a hospital and they're making a living wage. Just to give them ideas, just to get them thinking. You could take a walk with a young person and maybe occasionally say, well, what would you think about working here? What would you think about working there? Educate young adults about IPS. Let them know about the client preferences, the rapid job search or education plan. Stay in close contact with the IPS specialist after a referral, and point out accomplishments that the person makes, both large and small. Also, if you do have some people who are taking psychotropic medication, stay in touch with the medication prescribers, so that you know what's happening with their medication, because that could affect employment. Um, warm handoffs have been demonstrated time and time again in research studies to make a difference. So when somebody starts to express interest in employment or education, it'd be really helpful if you could invite an IPS specialist to your next appointment. And that wouldn't be to push the person to make any decisions right away, but just to talk about what are IPS services, how they help with school and work, and what are the person's interests? What's he thinking about school, work, career? Just let the IPS specialist get to know the person a little bit. It may be that at the end of that appointment, the young person is ready to go, which is fine. But if not, the IPS specialist might just come back in a couple months and ask where things are at again. You just don't want to you want to keep things percolating and help the person consider his options. If somebody says they want IPS services, they're ready for a referral, see if you can have an appointment with the three of you, the client and the IPS specialist together, um, to introduce the IPS specialist. People are more likely to follow through with IPS services if there's a warm handoff like this one, and if they can see that their housing staff and their case manager are all working together with the IPS specialist. And you might occasionally, while the person is job searching or working or going to school, you might occasionally have a meeting with the three of you or four of you again, just to talk about how things are going, how the progress is coming along. There's a there's a high correlation between integrated services and success. So programs that are really integrated in the ways that I just described are able to help more people with jobs and careers than programs that don't integrate their services. Oh, so that's what I just said, I think. Um, Everybody needs to know about the person's goal and work together to support them. Um, and everybody needs to believe that careers will have a positive impact on the young people and their future lives. Help people, that it's important to help youth become independent. So, in summary, work, education, and training is beneficial to young adults. IPS is an evidence-based practice that helps with work and careers, and mental health workers, substance abuse specialists, caseworkers, and housing staff can ask about career goals, point out the person's strengths, point out the person's accomplishments, and help the IPS specialist and the worker develop strategies that will lead to success. So that's all I had to cover today. And I hope you enjoy your job at Covenant House. I'm sure you will. And I hope that you really get into IPS and helping young people prepare to be independent.